I don't even know where to begin. My wife, Leanne, has always been my best friend and my rock. We've been married for 7 years, and for most of that time, I thought we had the kind of connection that could weather anything. But recently, something has shifted. It's hard to put into words. Leanne hasn't done anything obvious to make me feel this way. There's been no big argument or dramatic moment. It's just this distance. She's been spending more time on her phone, zoning out during conversations. And when we do talk, it feels like her mind is somewhere else entirely. Last night, though, things came to a head. We had dinner together, and she barely said a word. She picked at her food like she wasn't even hungry, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was weighing on her. After dinner, she sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling through her phone with this faraway look in her eyes. "Leanne," I said softly, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. "Is everything okay?" She froze for a moment, then sighed deeply. Finally, she looked at me, and I could see something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. "I need to go out tonight," she said, almost in a whisper. "Out where?" I asked, surprised. It was a weeknight, and we weren't exactly the kind of people who went out late on a Tuesday. "Just out," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "I'm meeting some friends at a club." Leanne isn't the type to go clubbing, especially without me. The last time we went to a club was years ago, and it was for a friend's birthday. So hearing her say this felt off. "Leanne," I started, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is kind of sudden, don't you think? We were going to watch that show you love tonight. What's going on?" She sighed again, and this time her eyes filled with tears. "Jonah, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I need this, okay? It's been a hard few weeks, and I need a break. Please try to understand." Her words stung, but it was the tears that hit me the hardest. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to argue, to tell her this wasn't like her, but something in her expression stopped me. "All right," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "If it's that important to you, go. But Leanne, promise me you'll be careful." She nodded quickly, as if relieved I hadn't pressed her further. Without another word, she disappeared into the bedroom to get ready. When she came out, my stomach dropped. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Sleek, tight, and far more revealing than anything she usually wore. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled perfectly. She looked stunning, but it felt like she was dressed for someone else, not for me. "You look nice," I said, forcing a smile. "Thanks," she murmured, barely glancing at me as she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house, leaving me in a deafening silence. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the empty spot where she had been. My mind raced with questions. Who was she meeting? Why did she seem so desperate to leave? And why did it feel like she was slipping away from me? I tried to distract myself with TV, but nothing could hold my attention. The silence in the house felt heavier than ever, and I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. I told myself I was overthinking, that she just needed some space, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Around midnight, I heard the front door creak open. I jumped up, my heart racing. Leanne walked in, her face pale and her eyes red, like she'd been crying. "Leanne," I said, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. She just looked at me for a moment, then said, "I'm going to bed," before disappearing into the bedroom. I stood there, frozen, as a wave of confusion and dread washed over me. What had happened tonight? Why did she come home like that? And why did I feel like this was just the beginning of something I wasn't prepared to face? The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Leanne moving around the kitchen. For a moment, I thought maybe things would feel normal again, like last night had been some strange, one-off situation. But when I walked in and saw her, that fragile hope shattered. She was standing by the counter, pouring herself a cup of coffee, but her posture was stiff and her face was void of any emotion. She didn't look up as I entered, just kept staring into her mug like it held the answers to the universe. "Morning?" I said cautiously, trying to read her mood. "Morning," she replied flatly, not meeting my eyes. The silence between us was unbearable. I wanted to ask her 1,000 questions, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't want to sound accusatory, but I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. "How was your night?" I finally asked, keeping my tone light. Her hand froze mid-stir. She looked at me for a split second before turning back to her coffee. "It was fine," she said quietly. "Fine?" I echoed, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Leanne, you came home looking like you'd been crying. Is there something you want to talk about?" "I said it was fine, Jonah," she snapped, her voice sharper than I expected. "Can we just leave it at that?" Her tone caught me off guard. Leanne was usually calm, even during arguments. But this was different. It felt like she was building a wall between us, and I didn't know how to break through. "All right," I said, taking a step back. "If you don't want to talk about it, I won't push. But if something's wrong, you can tell me. You know that, right?" She nodded without looking at me, then grabbed her coffee and walked out of the kitchen. I stood there, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Leanne stayed distant, avoiding any meaningful interaction with me. She spent most of the afternoon in the bedroom or out running errands, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. By the evening, I couldn't take the silence anymore. When she came into the living room after dinner, I decided to try again. "Leanne," I started, keeping my voice steady. "I don't want to fight, but I can't ignore what's happening. You've been distant lately, and last night, it felt like you were keeping something from me. Please, just tell me what's going on." She looked at me, and for a moment, I thought she might actually open up. But then she shook her head and said, "You're imagining things, Jonah. I told you, I just needed a night out, that's all." Her words felt hollow, like she was reciting a script. I wanted to believe her, but my gut told me there was more to the story. "Leanne, if there's something—" "Jonah, stop," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "You're suffocating me. I just need some space, okay?" Her outburst left me speechless. I watched as she stormed out of the room, leaving me sitting there with a sinking feeling in my chest. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I couldn't sleep. She was turned away from me, her breathing steady, but I could feel the distance between us like a physical barrier. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over in my mind. What had happened to us? How had we gone from being so close to feeling like strangers? And why did I feel like whatever was going on with Leanne was bigger than she was letting on? I didn't have any answers, just an overwhelming sense of dread that this was far from over. The next few days were a blur of avoidance and tension. Leanne and I barely spoke. When we did, it was limited to mundane pleasantries. How was work? Or Did you pick up the groceries? But there was no warmth, no connection. It felt like we were both tiptoeing around something too fragile to confront. I tried to convince myself that this was just a phase, that every couple goes through rough patches. But late at night, when I was alone with my thoughts, doubt crept in. My mind replayed every moment of the past week. Her abrupt decision to go out, the dress, the tears, the way she came home looking broken. Something was wrong, and the more I ignored it, the more it consumed me. It was Friday evening when I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, or at the very least, reassurance that I wasn't going crazy. I waited until after dinner, when Leanne was scrolling through her phone on the couch, her face illuminated by the screen's cold light. "Leanne," I said, sitting down across from her. My tone was calm, but my heart was racing. "We need to talk." She glanced up briefly, then back at her phone. "About what?" "About us. About what's been going on lately. I feel like we're not okay, and I don't know why." She sighed heavily and set her phone down, finally meeting my eyes. "Jonah, I don't know what you want me to say." "I told you, I've just been stressed. Work has been a lot lately, and I'm trying to deal with it in my own way." "But you've been shutting me out," I said, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay composed. "You don't talk to me anymore. You're distant. I just want to understand what's happening." Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or frustration. She ran a hand through her hair and looked away. "You're overthinking this, Jonah. Sometimes people need space. It doesn't mean there's something wrong." "Then why does it feel like there is?" I pressed. "Why did you come home that night looking so broken?" "You haven't been the same since." For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but she quickly masked it with a tight smile. "I had a tough night, that's all. I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want to worry you." Her words sounded rehearsed, like she'd prepared this explanation in advance, but I didn't want to push her too hard and risk driving her further away. "Okay," I said reluctantly. "If you don't want to tell me, I'll respect that. But please, Leanne, just don't shut me out. I love you, and I want to help you through whatever this is." She nodded, her expression softening slightly. "I love you too, Jonah. I promise. Everything will be fine. I just need some time to figure things out." I wanted to believe her. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me, the unease in my chest wouldn't go away. The next morning, I noticed something odd. Leanne had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was getting ready. It wasn't like her to leave it lying around. She was usually pretty attached to it. For a moment, I debated whether to look at it. I hated the idea of invading her privacy. But the doubt and fear in my mind were overwhelming. What if the answers I needed were right there? Before I could decide, she walked into the kitchen, and I stepped away quickly, pretending to be busy with the coffee maker. "Morning," she said, her voice unusually chipper. "Morning," I replied, watching as she grabbed her phone and tucked it into her pocket. I wanted to ask her why she suddenly seemed in such a good mood, but I held back. It felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, afraid that one wrong move would shatter whatever fragile piece we still had. Later that afternoon, I was tidying up the living room when I noticed a crumpled piece of paper wedged between the couch cushions. Curious, I pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a receipt for a cocktail bar downtown. The date on it was the night Leanne went out. My stomach sank. She told me she was meeting friends at a club, But this wasn't a club. It was a small, intimate bar known for being a popular spot for date nights. I stared at the receipt, my mind racing. Had she lied to me? And if she had, why? I didn't confront her about it right away. I needed time to process, to figure out how to approach this without accusing her of something I couldn't prove. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. That night, as I lay awake again while she slept peacefully beside me, I couldn't help but wonder, who was she really with that night? And why did it feel like she was keeping secrets from me? I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. The discovery of the receipt weighed heavily on me. I kept it hidden in my wallet, like some incriminating clue from a crime scene, though I wasn't even sure what crime had been committed. The name of the bar, the Velvet Rose, echoed in my mind, stirring more questions than answers. That morning, as I watched Leanne sip her coffee at the kitchen table, I couldn't stop myself from replaying every moment of that night she went out. The dress, the tears, the way she avoided my questions. It all felt wrong. And now, with the receipt in hand, my mind was running wild with possibilities. "Leanne," I said, breaking the silence. She glanced up from her mug. "Yeah. What was the name of the club you went to the other night?" Her face barely shifted, but I caught a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. It was the Orchid Lounge, I think." "Why?" The lie hit me like a punch to the gut. I forced a casual shrug. "Just curious. I couldn't remember if you told me." She nodded and returned to her coffee, but I couldn't focus on anything else. She hadn't just avoided the truth. She'd lied outright. And the worst part was that she'd done it so effortlessly, as if she didn't even feel guilty about it. I spent the rest of the day trying to keep my emotions in check. But my thoughts kept spiraling. Who had she gone to the Velvet Rose with? Why had she lied to me about it? And what was really going on that night? By the time evening rolled around, I was on edge. Leanne, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease. She even suggested we order takeout and watch a movie together, like she was trying to smooth things over without addressing the real issue. As we sat on the couch, my mind wandered, unable to focus on the screen in front of me. The weight of the receipt in my wallet was like a constant reminder that something wasn't right. "Jonah?" Leanne's voice pulled me back to reality. "You've been quiet tonight. Are you okay?" Her question caught me off guard. For a moment, I considered confronting her, laying everything out on the table. But then I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if there was some innocent explanation for all of this, and I was just letting my insecurities get the better of me? "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." She seemed to accept my answer, but I could feel her watching me out of the corner of her eye. It was as if she knew I was holding something back, just as I knew she was doing the same. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room with the receipt in my hand. I stared at the date and time printed on it, trying to make sense of it all. My curiosity was burning a hole in me, but I knew I couldn't confront her without more information. The next morning, I made a decision. I'd go to the Velvet Rose myself and see if I could learn anything. It wasn't a plan I was proud of, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. I needed answers, and waiting for Leanne to give them to me wasn't working. That evening, after Leanne left for a yoga class, I drove downtown. The bar was tucked away on a quiet street, its entrance marked by a simple sign and soft, glowing lights. It wasn't the kind of place we'd ever been to together, which only deepened the mystery. When I walked in, the atmosphere hit me immediately. It was intimate, with dim lighting, plush booths, and a warm, inviting vibe. Couples sat close together, talking in hushed tones, and the bartenders moved gracefully behind the counter. I approached the bar, trying to act casual. "Excuse me," I said to the bartender, a young woman with a friendly smile. "I'm trying to track down a friend who was here earlier this week. Do you remember a woman with long blonde hair, wearing a navy blue dress?" The bartender frowned thoughtfully. "Maybe. We get a lot of people in here. Do you know what day it was?" "Tuesday," I said, my heart pounding. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I remember her. She was sitting at one of the booths in the back. Kind of hard to forget. She was with a guy who looked really nervous." "A guy?" My stomach twisted. What did he look like? She shrugged. Dark hair, clean-shaven, business casual. Looked like he was out of his element. "Sorry, that's all I remember." "Did they seem close?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The bartender hesitated, clearly unsure of how to answer. "They weren't all over each other, if that's what you mean. But they definitely seemed personal." I thanked her and left the bar, my mind reeling. My gut had told me something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed by a stranger was a whole different kind of pain. As I sat in my car, staring blankly at the steering wheel, a wave of emotions crashed over me. Anger, confusion, betrayal. But more than anything, a deep, aching sadness. I didn't know who the man was or what had happened that night. But one thing was clear. Leanne wasn't telling me the whole truth, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it. The drive home from the bar was a blur. My thoughts were a storm, each one more painful than the last. Who was the man Leanne had been with? Why hadn't she told me the truth? And what did personal even mean? I didn't have any solid answers, just fragments of a reality I didn't want to face. When I got home, Leanne was already back from her yoga class. She was in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured herself a glass of water. The image of her standing there, so calm and composed, felt like a slap in the face. "Hey," she said, glancing at me with a smile. "How was your evening?" "Fine," I replied, my voice strained. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. She raised an eyebrow, noticing my tone. "You sure?" "You seem off." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, but the words caught in my throat. I wasn't ready, not yet. "I'm just tired," I said finally. "Long day." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me, searching for something. "All right." "I'm going to take a shower," she said, disappearing down the hall. As soon as I was alone, I pulled the receipt from my wallet and stared at it. The name, The Velvet Rose, seemed to taunt me, a constant reminder of how little I truly knew about what was happening. The next day, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to Leanne and the man at the bar. I thought about what the bartender had said, that they weren't all over each other. But there was something personal about their interaction. It wasn't enough to accuse her of anything outright, but it was enough to make me question everything. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I decided to test the waters. "Leanne," I said, keeping my tone casual, "do you remember when we used to go on those date nights, just the two of us, trying new places around town?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah, those were fun. We should do that again sometime." "I heard about a place downtown recently," I continued, my heart pounding. "It's called the Velvet Rose. Ever been there?" Her reaction was subtle but unmistakable. Her fork paused midair, and her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "No, I don't think so," she said, avoiding my gaze. The lie stung, even though I'd been expecting it. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but inside my suspicion grew stronger. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I realized I couldn't keep tiptoeing around the truth. I needed answers, real answers, and I wasn't going to get them by waiting for Leanne to confess. I decided that the next step was finding out who the man at the bar was. If I could identify him, maybe I'd finally understand what was going on. But the thought of what I might uncover made my stomach churn. For now, all I could do was brace myself for whatever was coming next. Something told me this wasn't going to end well. The lie lingered in my mind like a wound that refused to heal. Leanne had looked me in the eyes and told me she'd never been to the Velvet Rose, and yet I held the proof in my hands. I could have confronted her right then, but I wanted more. I needed more. The next day, I left work early and drove back to the bar. The same bartender was there, and when she saw me, recognition flickered across her face. "You again," she said, polishing a glass. "Still looking for your friend?" I nodded, feeling a weight in my chest. "Yeah, I need to know. The guy she was with. Did you catch his name?" She frowned, thinking. "I don't remember hearing it. But he paid with a card." She glanced around, lowering her voice. "I probably shouldn't do this. But hold on." My pulse raced as she disappeared to the back. A minute later, she returned with a scrap of paper, sliding it toward me. The name on the receipt hit me like a freight train. Ryan Ellison. I stared at it, my mind struggling to catch up. Ryan? Leanne's co-worker? The one she always said was just a friend? The guy I had met once at a company holiday party and thought nothing of? I swallowed hard. "Are you sure it was him?" The bartender shrugged. "I don't know him personally, but that's the card he used." I nodded numbly, my hands tightening into fists. I wanted to believe this was still innocent, but everything pointed to the opposite. That night, I sat across from Leanne at dinner, barely touching my food. She looked at me with concern. "Jonah, you've been quiet lately. Is something wrong?" I forced a smile. "Just a long week." She nodded but didn't press further. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how long she had been lying to me. I wanted to know why she looked me in the eyes and pretended nothing had changed when everything had. Instead, I swallowed my anger and told myself to wait. I wasn't ready for this confrontation. Not yet. But it was coming. And when it did, there would be no turning back. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Ryan's name burned into my thoughts. I pictured them sitting together at the Velvet Rose, whispering in hushed voices, leaning in close. The bartender had said they weren't all over each other, but they didn't have to be. Emotional betrayal could be just as painful, maybe worse. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront Leanne. But how? I could throw the name Ryan Ellison in her face, demand answers, but I knew her too well. If she wanted to, she could lie her way out of it, twist the story, make me doubt myself. I needed a way to get the truth straight from her. And then it hit me. Leanne had never been careless about her phone. Lately, she had been glued to it. If there were any real answers, they were in there. I had never been the type to snoop. I believed in trust and privacy. But now, trust had already been shattered. I just needed an opportunity. That evening, I sat on the couch, pretending to scroll through my own phone as she sat next to me, focused on hers. When she got up to grab a drink from the kitchen, she left it on the armrest. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. This was it. I reached for it, my fingers shaking, and turned the screen on. A message thread was open. Ryan's name was at the top. I felt my stomach drop as I skimmed the messages. They weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. Ryan, last night was really intense. Are you okay? Leanne, yeah, I just feel guilty. I don't know what to do. Ryan, you know how I feel about you, Leanne, but I get it. Just let me know where your head is. Leanne, I need time to think. I don't want to hurt Jonah. He doesn't deserve this. My hands were shaking. I barely heard Leanne's footsteps until she was right behind me. What are you doing? I turned slowly, still gripping her phone. The color drained from her face when she saw what was on the screen. She didn't say a word, didn't try to take the phone back, just stared at me. Her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open, like she was struggling to find air. Tell me the truth, Leanne, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Are you in love with him? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. That was all the answer I needed. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The weight of the silence was unbearable. I could see the panic in Leanne's eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. I set her phone down on the coffee table and exhaled slowly. I think we both know where this is going, I said, my voice steady. Jonah, she started, but I held up a hand. Don't. Please, I don't need excuses. I don't even need an apology. I shook my head, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I just need honesty. Can you give me that? She swallowed hard, her eyes welling up. I never meant for this to happen. I gave a dry chuckle. No one ever does. She sat down on the couch, burying her face in her hands. I love you, Jonah. But somewhere along the way, I think I lost myself. I didn't know how to tell you I was unhappy. I let her words settle. There was no shouting, no accusations, just two people standing at the end of something that had once been beautiful. I sighed and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You should have told me. I know, she whispered, but I was scared. For a second, I wanted to feel pity for her. Maybe a part of me still did. But I also knew that love, the real kind, wasn't supposed to make you feel unwanted. Love wasn't supposed to be something you had to chase. I stood up, suddenly knowing exactly what I needed to do. I think we should separate, I said, the words clear and final. She flinched, but she didn't argue. Maybe she had been expecting it. Maybe she even knew it was the right choice, too. Jonah, her voice cracked, but she nodded. Okay. I packed a bag that night, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wasn't going to fight for someone who wasn't willing to fight for me. As I drove away, I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel like a man who had lost something. I felt like a man who had been given a second chance, at happiness, at peace, at a life where I wouldn't have to beg someone to love me the way I deserved. The road ahead was unknown,